Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
Okay, the program will begin shortly.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The program will begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The problem. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We're about to begin.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Ambrose Monell, president of the Vetlesen Foundation, and I want to welcome all of you to this tonight. On behalf of the foundation and my fellow directors, Maurizio Morello, Gary Beecham, along with Lorraine Morales, secretary of the foundation, I would like to welcome you to the 30th and 31st awarding of the Vetlesen Prize. We are tonight especially delighted to welcome two of Mr. Vetlesen's great-granddaughters. Amelia Monell, a recent magna cum laude graduate of Columbia and a master's graduate in literature from Cambridge University, is currently pursuing her graduate studies in creative writing at the New School. Maya Monell is a recent graduate of Wake Forest University and a master's graduate with merit from Cass Business School at City University, London. She is now working at Bridge Athletic, a software startup in San Francisco. Tonight, we are honored to award the Vetlesen Prize to Dr. Marc Kane, the G. Unger Vetlesen Professor of Earth and Climate Sciences at Columbia, and Dr. George Philander, the Knox Taylor Professor of Geosciences at Princeton University. A brief overview of their extraordinary and voluminous accomplishments can be found in your program. Doctors Kane and Philander join a group of distinguished winners of the Vetlesen Prize, which was first awarded more than a half-century ago to Dr. Maurice Ewing, Lamont Doherty's first director. Dr. Wallace Broker, a recipient of the 16th Vetlesen Prize in 1987, along with Dr. Lynn Sykes, a recipient of the 23rd Vetlesen Prize in 2000, are here with us tonight, and we welcome them back. As you know, the prize is given for outstanding achievement in the earth sciences, resulting in a clearer understanding of the Earth and its history, along with its relation to the universe. This pursuit has and always will be an inviting challenge for mankind to pursue. The prize was established by the Vetlesen Foundation in 1959, and this year's recipients, Drs. Kane and Philander, were selected by a 7-member jury appointed by the president of Columbia University. The Vetlesen Foundation itself was established in 1955 by a gift from Georg Unger Vetlesen shortly before he died. Mr. Vetlesen, a Norwegian born in Oslo, began his career as a naval architect after attending Imperial College in London. He emigrated to New York prior to 1920, where he eventually met and married my grandmother, Maud Monell, the widow of my grandfather, Ambrose Monell, a distinguished Columbia University alumnus. After marrying in 1932, the Vetlesens pursued his lifelong love of sailing with a purchase of E.F. Hutton's Hussar, which they renamed Vima, a combination of their two names, Vetlesen and Maud. Nearly 25 years later, she would play an important role in Lamont Doherty's history. With the Second War approaching, the Vetlesens became active in supporting the Norwegian resistance effort against Germany. After America entered the war, Vetlesen was made a U.S. citizen, commissioned as a commander of the U.S. Naval Reserve, and in the summer of 1943, he was assigned to the Allied Special Forces headquarters in London to coordinate the United States OSS and Britain's SOE resistance activity in southern Norway and Denmark. At the conclusion of the war, in recognition of his service, Vetlesen received nearly a dozen awards from the United States and 4 other countries. In an interesting side note, my grandmother Maud also received the highest award from Norway in recognition of her individual support. After the war, Vetlesen returned to private life, where he resumed his quest for stronger economic and cultural ties between Norway and America. In addition to his successful career as a shipping executive of the Norwegian American line, he co-founded Scandinavian Airline Systems, what we know today as SAS. He also became an officer and a director of the American Scandinavian Foundation based here in New York, whose mission is to promote cultural ties between America and Scandinavia. Shortly before Vetlesen's death in 1956, Dr. Maurice Ewing was searching for a vessel capable of conducting global oceanographic research for the new Lamont Doherty Observatory. By happenstance, the ship he found was Vima, the Vetlesen former yacht. A short time later, in 1958, with a grant from the Foundation to support the publication of research findings of Vima cruises, the beginning of a long relationship between the Vetlesen Foundation and Lamont Doherty began. As the Foundation has grown, its support has widened to many other research institutions, including the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, Scripps Institute of Oceanography, University of Washington, Oregon State, MIT, Bermuda Institute of Ocean Science, Rosenstiel Institute at the University of Miami, the University of Rhode Island, and the University of Texas. Of those many annual grants, the majority are designed to support studies seeking to better understand the complex Earth systems that affect the variability of global climate. Over the past 20 years alone, the Vetlesen Foundation has made more than $90 million in grants directed to this area of climate research. The vast majority of those grants have been unrestricted. Over that period of time, nearly 20% of that support has been directed to Lamont Doherty, reflecting the long-held respect of the institution and its leadership by the Foundation and its directors. Finally, tonight, in addition to all of you who we're so pleased to see, we are also pleased to welcome a special guest, Dr. Fareed Zakaria. I'm sure many of you have seen Dr. Zakaria's CNN show, Fareed Zakaria GPS, which earned a Peabody Award in 2011. And if you've not seen the show, I'm sure you've read, at one time or another, his weekly Washington Post column. In addition, Dr. Zakaria is also a contributing editor at The Atlantic, as well as a New York Times best-selling author. From 2010 to 2014, Dr. Zakaria served as editor-at-large for Time, and before that, he spent 10 years overseeing all of Newsweek's editions abroad. While his columns have received many awards, including a 2010 National Magazine Award, his October 2001 Newsweek cover, Why They Hate Us, remains the most decorated. Before joining Newsweek from 1992 to 2000, he served as the managing director of Foreign Affairs, a post he was appointed to at the extraordinary age of 28. Dr. Zakaria will be joining us shortly, and he will be part of the ongoing program as we get to dessert and coffee. So right now we're all going to take a break so we don't have to, we can listen to one another and not somebody from up here. I hope you all enjoy your dinner, and thank you once again for coming.
This is such a magnificent occasion and such a beautiful space that I would love to have everyone's attention. Good evening and welcome to the 19th Vetlesen Prize ceremony. For those of you who think you are at the Vetlesen Prize ceremony, you have not understood the proper Norwegian pronunciation, which I have from a descendant of Mr. Vetlesen. Swallow the V, make it sound more like a W, and it's Vetlesen, not Vetlesen. Anyway, I'm Fareed Zakaria. I am greatly honored to be part of this evening's festivities. This is a celebration of science. It is a celebration of scientists. It is a celebration of the study of science, of academia, of research in general, all things that I feel these days are somewhat endangered and threatened species in the political climate we are in. So, we are here tonight because of the forethought and the enduring commitment of Georg Unger Vetlesen. The foundation contributes to scientific achievement to result in a clearer understanding of the Earth, its history, and its relationship to the universe. It was established, the prize was established in 1959, and it makes this prestigious ceremony possible. The prize was first awarded to Maurice Ewing in 1960, a pioneering geophysicist who set the foundation for much of what we know today about oceanography and plate tectonics. Dr. Ewing also happened to be the first director of Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. So please join me in thanking the Vetlesen Foundation for their ongoing commitment to science. The prize is administered by Columbia University, by the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. We'll hear from Sean Solomon, the director of the observatory, in a second, but join me in thanking Columbia University and the observatory for their leadership role in making all of this possible, please. The Vetlesen Prize has recognized the groundbreaking work of oceanographers, astronomers, chemists, glaciologists, and volcanologists, just to name a few. I didn't actually until now know that volcanology was a separate, distinct field with a title. I think would delight every child to know that you can grow up and do nothing but study volcanoes. Tonight we're going to honor the exceptional work, dedication, and commitment of two of today's leaders in climate science. Marc Kane and George Philander's research has changed the way we understand the world. They study how the oceans and the atmosphere interact, and what to me is fascinating is they work separately, but as so often happens in science, they're at the same time working synergistically, because science really is a great collective enterprise where the work and the research builds not just on past generations, but on what people are doing presently around the world. It really has achieved a status where it knows no borders, and where quality matters much more than almost anything else. They laid out the framework for understanding the cyclical interaction of winds and currents that sweep the tropical Pacific Ocean every 2 to 7 years, affecting weather across the world. That work allows us to forecast the climate swings we call El Niño and La Niña from months to years in advance. Institutions worldwide now monitor the warning signs to help prepare for crop plantings, disease control, floods, and drought. Although this evening's prize focuses on their scientific contributions, their individual work goes far beyond. Marc Kane and George Philander also understand the importance of educating others and the application of their science in the day-to-day lives of all of us in the planet. They are great scientists, but also great communicators of science, which is an important role in and of itself. So we thank them for that as well. Let me close with just a few thoughts of my own on this moment, because we are at a moment, as I mentioned, politically, that is, I think, very dangerous. And I'm not going to make a particularly partisan point about party politics, what I want to talk about is something that strikes me as even more worrisome. And that is the more general assault, skepticism, and questioning of the idea of expertise, of the idea of experts, of the idea of facts, and at some level of the idea of truth itself. This strikes me as one of the most dangerous currents that is coursing through the American body politic, and it can only end very badly for a country. Let me give you an example of what is happening out there. People have come to the conclusion that you really don't need to know much about anything to have very strong opinions about everything. As a journalist, I'm used to this. You know, every time I sit down at a dinner like this, the person next to me, not in this case, I should say, Sean Sullivan did not do this, will say to me, you know what you should be doing on CNN, you know what you should be doing at the Washington Post, and will proceed to tell me exactly how we should restructure our business, our what we should cover. And I used to tell this to people and say, it's funny, everyone is an expert as far as journalism is concerned. When you sit next to a doctor, if it's, he's a cardiologist or a cardiac surgeon, you don't say, well, the way you go in through the leg, I think that's all wrong. I think you should really be making the incision in an entirely different place. But people don't do that. Well, increasingly they do. Increasingly there is this broader rejection of the idea of authority. Think about the fact that you have had a presidential candidate who became president who entirely dismissed 50 years of research on vaccines and decided that, in his view, they caused autism. 99.9% of the experts say no, but hey, what do the experts know, right? And that, of course, is true in case after case, most dramatically and worryingly, of course, with regard to climate science. In 2015, public policy polling asked primary voters, now remember, these are primary voters, so these are people who you assume are carefully and selectively paying attention, eagerly, enthusiastically following information. These are our most active citizens. They asked primary voters, would they support the bombing of Agrabah? A third of Republicans said yes, 19% of Democrats said yes, 13% of Republicans said no, 36% of Democrats said no. Agrabah is a place that exists in the Disney cartoon movie Aladdin. So 43% of Republicans and 55% of Democrats, worryingly, had a very fixed, actual, defined view of whether to bomb a cartoon country or not. And what you find in these situations, and what is most worrying, is the level of determination and zealotry and conviction on an issue is often inversely proportional to the knowledge about that issue. So there was another poll done where they asked people whether the United States should go to war in Ukraine. The answers correlated perfectly with another question which had been asked before, which was, where is Ukraine? People who thought Ukraine was roughly where Mexico is were most enthusiastic about bombing it. I can go on and on, but the point I'm trying to make is that we're reaching a place where it is very dangerous for us to be conducting democracy in the way we are with as little information as we have and as little regard for things like information, facts, science, and experts and expertise. Thomas Jefferson is reported to have said that the single most important factor that would determine the success of a democracy was an educated citizenry. One of the things I try to hope that I'm doing in my work is helping to educate the citizenry. But I have to confess, one worries a great deal. And it is therefore doubly, triply, and quadruply important that when we have such extraordinary and distinguished purveyors of truth, fact, wisdom, as best as we can determine it using our human cognitive capacities, we should honor them as lavishly and as fulsomely as we can and as we are doing this evening. So thank you all very much. Sean Solomon will now take the stage.
Thank you, Fareed, for your opening remarks and for correcting my mispronunciation of Vetlesen after all these years. I would like to add a few remarks concerning tonight's laureates, Marc Kane and George Philander. Marc Kane grew up in Brooklyn. My notes say to pause there because people will probably applaud. His father was a principal of a vocational public high school. His mother, a school attendance officer. He studied applied mathematics at Harvard. You don't have to applaud. Graduating with a bachelor's degree in 1965 and a master's degree in 1966. He was deeply involved in liberal social causes, and he took a hiatus from his studies to work and to attend civil rights rallies, join protests to the Vietnam War, and travel to the U.S. South to organize black voters. He then returned to academia to earn a PhD in meteorology from MIT in 1975. He moved to the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory in 1984, where he is now the G. Unger Vetlesen Professor Emeritus of Earth and Climate Science. While at Columbia, Marc founded the Master of Arts program in Climate and Society. In the early 1980s, Marc, together with his Lamont colleague and former student Stephen Zibiak, designed a computer model that they used to predict an El Nino event in 1986, months in advance. Versions of this model have predicted almost every El Nino event since then. Their advance helped lead to a network of Pacific Ocean buoys that register ocean heat and atmospheric conditions, and to the establishment of forecast centers in at least a half a dozen nations. Marc also spearheaded the establishment in 1996 of Columbia University's International Research Institute for Climate and Society, or IRI, applaud, which now forecasts El Nino and related climate swings. With such information, IRI works with developing nations and farmers to optimize agricultural planning, with the International Red Cross to stockpile relief supplies ahead of potential floods or droughts, with public health authorities to prepare for weather-influenced outbreaks of vector-borne diseases, and with hydropower authorities on water management. George Philander grew up the child of school teachers near Cape Town, South Africa, where his father was a noted Afrikaans poet. George earned a bachelor's degree in applied mathematics and physics from the University of Cape Town in 1962. When the apartheid laws officially divided the country into separate races, his family moved to New York City. George earned a PhD in applied mathematics from Harvard in 1970. He did postdoctoral work at MIT, and he moved shortly thereafter to Princeton, where he is now the Knox Taylor Professor of Geosciences. George has since returned to South Africa with some regularity to teach. He is the founder there of the Applied Center for Climate and Earth Systems Science, which promotes education and research opportunities for South African undergraduates, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. In addition to his many peer-reviewed papers, he has authored 4 books, including Our Affair with El Nino and the Encyclopedia of Global Warming and Climate Change. Tonight, Marc Kane and George Philander will be presented with the 30th Vetlesen Prize Medal, and they join the prior recipients whose extraordinary achievements in the earth sciences have been recognized with this prize. It's my pleasure now to introduce Michael Purdy, representing Columbia University, Mike is a marine seismologist. Mike is a former director of the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, and Mike is now Columbia University's executive vice president for research. Mike Purdy.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to see so many good friends and honored guests at this always such a very happy occasion. And it's especially good to see our friends from the Vetlesen Foundation, Ambrose and Maurizio. I think it was at the last, I haven't seen you since the last medal ceremony in 2015. As Sean said, we're here to honor Marc Kane and George Philander, and it's a genuine privilege to recognize two such great gentlemen whose great personalities match the quality of their intellectual contributions. I'd like to add briefly, and only briefly, to Sean's comments about the Vetlesen Foundation. Sorry, I'm an Englishman, I'm very conservative, I have to stick with the old pronunciation. This foundation has contributed massively to the Earth Science Research Enterprise since their support began 57 years ago. During that period, the science has seen great revolutions. Ideas of continental drift and plate tectonics were only tiny glimmers in 1960. The ocean's role in the control of global climate was not understood at all. Earth and climate sciences had no robust overarching framework. The foresight displayed by the leaders of Vetlesen all those years ago, the foresight to support the best geoscience research at the nation's leading universities, has had impact around the globe that in no way linear related to the magnitude of the investment. And there has been no other time in my career when the importance of foundation support for basic science has been more important than it is today, when the federal government's commitment to the pursuit of new knowledge by scientific inquiry is uncertain and of unclear priority. The last time I participated in a march protesting government action was in 1968 in London, and my hair was a lot longer then. 49 years later, this Saturday, in fact, I'm going down to DC to join the March for Science to help what I hope will be tens of thousands of my colleagues communicate by their actions and by their physical presence that the quest for new knowledge is an essential cornerstone of any great society. The Vetlesen Foundation understands this. If you want proof that the ideals they laid down 57 years ago are still alive today, then simply review the accomplishments and appreciate the breadth and depth of the impacts that this evening's honorees, Professor Marc Kane and George Philander, have had on the science of climate variability. If Marc and George, you'd step up to the stage, please. Which brings us to the moment when we actually present the 2017 Vetlesen Medal to Professor Marc Kane and to Professor George Philander. And I will begin this process by reading the citation. It's a single citation to both of these great researchers. Working independently but in synergy, Professors Kane and Philander have altered our understanding of the manner by which the ocean and atmosphere interact to produce year-to-year changes in climate in the tropics and around the globe. The understanding enabled by their work has made it possible to predict El Niño and La Niña from months to years in advance. Outside of the seasonal cycle, El Niño and La Niña have the greatest impact on year-to-year global weather patterns and predictions of widespread implications for society. Professors Kane and Philander have spurred the application of this scientific information to a wide range of topics of great importance, including agriculture, social conflict, river flow, and vector-borne diseases. They have shown that ocean-atmosphere interactions in the tropics can drive climate change on timescales ranging from seasons to millions of years, and they have used this insight to inspire several generations of researchers to explain the great mysteries in the paleoclimate record. Professor Kane is best known for his development with his student Stephen Zibiak, who's here today somewhere. Stephen? Of the first numerical model of the tropical ocean and atmosphere able to simulate the El Niño Southern Oscillation, and for the first successful prediction of an El Niño event months in advance in 1986. That work built on his earlier studies of the dynamics of the tropical oceans and their response to winds. The success of the first El Niño prediction led to the establishment of forecast centers around the world and to the deployment of moored buoys that provide real-time information on the conditions of tropical oceans. Professor Kane's work helped to usher in the view in Earth science that the oceans and atmosphere are strongly coupled and must be studied as part of the Earth system rather than in isolation. Moreover, Professor Kane realized earlier than most that the ability to make forecasts with such coupled models from regional to global scales would have a myriad of applications, from the effect of rainfall patterns on crop yields to predictions of drought severity and their impact on social conflict and human migration. Professor Philander's early work on the response of the tropical oceans to changes in winds, as well as his early use of general circulation models for the study of ocean currents and their variability, laid the foundations for present-day modeling and prediction of El Niño events. Professor Philander was one of the first scientists to explore the dynamics of the El Niño system and is credited with coining the name La Niña for its opposite state. Professor Philander provided the theoretical explanation for why the intertropical convergence zone is north of the equator, as well as the physics behind tropical instability waves. He was also one of the first physical oceanographers to invoke the geological record of Earth's past climate changes to gain a deeper understanding of the dynamics of the coupled ocean-atmosphere system. Professors Kane and Philander have both devoted considerable time and effort to education and to the application of their science. Professor Kane spearheaded the negotiations with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration that led to the establishment in 1996 of Columbia University's International Research Institute for Climate and Society, the world's first international institute with a mission to apply climate science in service to society. He founded in 2004 and for many years directed Columbia University's Master of Arts program in Climate and Society, designed to help young professionals and academics understand advances in climate science and forecasting and connect them with meaningful decisions. Professor Philander is the author of 2 books for general audiences, one on global warming and one on El Niño. A native of South Africa, he began in 2007 to organize and offer Habitable Planet workshops to introduce South African undergraduates, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, to Earth system science. His workshops employed graduates of the program as mentors and took advantage of the local environment for instructive field trips. And to date, his alumni number totals more than 1,000. He was also the founding director for the Applied Center for Climate and Earth System Science, an interagency organization that promotes education, research, and opportunity for students in South Africa. And so ends the formal citation for George and Marc. Many congratulations.
It's pretty nice. Well, celebrating this with my hometown crowd makes the occasion all the better for me. It's been my great good fortune to spend the last 33 years at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, which is still the scientific commune that Doc Ewing created. But since I arrived post-Ewing, to me it's always been Wally World. At Lamont, science is a calling, and we're the monks, albeit indifferently dressed monks. I am at present in awe of the terrific young scientists who continue to come to us, drawn by the intellectual excitement we offer, because we don't offer much money, when they could get a decent hard money job somewhere else. The IRI, the International Research Institute for Climate and Society, which arose out of the work that's being honored here tonight, shares the Lamont campus, and that took on the complex, really complex and poorly understood mission of applying climate science for the benefit of society. And the expertise and dedication of its staff is inspiring to me. And I must commend particularly Lisa Goddard, its director, who's done a marvelous job in leading it through a very difficult and dangerous time. So, for those of you who are not part of Lamont, I urge you to come and visit us and let us show you how we do science. And consider supporting us, because the federal government apparently isn't going to do that. Okay. And a good bit of my prize money will go into the IRI in Lamont. Now, I'm also, thank you. The Vetlesen Prize, or Vetlesen now, is especially rewarding to me because the Vetlesen Foundation supported the chair I held for almost 20 years, and they funded a good bit of the research that's being rewarded here today. And in the early days of that, George Rowe and Hank Walter, whom some of you would remember, would occasionally take me to lunch at the Rainbow Room and tell me all sorts of interesting things, which I won't be able to repeat here. And they were very encouraging, and I'm just sorry that they can't be here tonight. And as others have said, the prize is quite special, but my son, I think, put it better. It passes the child test, okay? The winners, past winners, did things that second graders are aware of, okay? Plate tectonics, global warming, and of course, the extinction of the dinosaurs, okay? So George and I are in very exalted company. It's a special pleasure to share this award with George, At the beginning of my career, he was tremendously helpful. And there was a long period when we talked virtually every day on the telephone for an hour or more, gossiping, talking about the meaning of life, and as well as science. We didn't make much headway on the meaning of life. And I guess tonight shows we did a bit better with the science. Okay. All my best work has been collaborative with wonderful colleagues and students, too many to name, but I must single out Ed Sarachek and Steve Zebiak. The work I did on equatorial wave theory was done with Ed, and with the exception of my advisor, Jewel Charney, Ed did as much as anyone to form my scientific outlook. Steve was my first student, and our joint work on simulating and predicting El Nino is the most obvious reason I'm standing here now. My deepest gratitude is to my foremost collaborator in life, my wife, Barbara, for her support over a lifetime. When George and I started, equatorial oceanography and ocean-atmosphere interactions were outside the oceanographic mainstream. But there was a great group of us in this tropical backwater, and we had tremendous fun because we could develop the subject almost from scratch. It was a great ride, and still is. The equatorial wave theory we developed and confronted with data proved to be freakishly effective. Honors like this go to individuals, or at least pairs of individuals, but this honor should be taken as a recognition of the extraordinary collective accomplishments of our tropical ocean community. Science is a collective enterprise. In thanking people, I should not admit the Tsar of all the Russians for ruling over such a miserable, virulently anti-Semitic empire that my ancestors took great risks to get out of there and come here, okay, to this country of immigrants. Now many of my friends Many of our friends and colleagues and students are among the newer immigrants who contribute immeasurably to our science and to this country. When that grandfather, one of the grandfathers, paid his taxes, he said, "Is that all it costs to live in this wonderful country?" Okay. Now, at this moment, there's much we see that is less than wonderful. But America's always been a flawed work in progress, and in our better moments, we narrow the gap between our reality and our ideals. Okay. Slavery is America's original sin, never adequately expiated. Martin Luther King, for whom one of my grandchildren is named, said that Negroes not only had a right to be free, they had a duty to be free, not just to themselves, but to all Americans. Perhaps I was naive about what could be accomplished when I involved myself in the civil rights movement. And perhaps it's the same naivete that makes me a scientist. As Steve Colbert put it, why? This is the question that scientists are always asking. You know who else asks that? 5-year-olds. Okay. That shows you the kind of mental development we're dealing with here. Actually, the why most often comes out as, that's funny, okay? The eureka moments are rather rare, and in a good year, we manage to add another grain to the great sandpile of science. I am really continually astounded by how little I understand. But ultimately, I'm very comforted by that. There's so much still to learn and so many more great problems to work on. Okay. But you shouldn't have the wrong idea from this. We know quite a lot. We know that our burning of fossil fuels puts CO2 in the atmosphere. We know that that CO2 causes the planet to heat up. We know that the planet is warmed over the industrial age. We know that this heat is melting glaciers and making sea level rise. These are facts, not alternative facts. Okay. Richard Feynman told us, science is what we have learned about how to keep from fooling ourselves. The consequences of the current disregard for science are profound, for the planet, for its inhabitants, human and otherwise, and for this country, which is built on technical innovation as much as anything. So I applaud the Vetlesen Foundation for their long support of our science. Their work is more important than ever now, and we need them more than ever. Okay. And I hope to see you all at the March for Science this Saturday. Defending science is not just our right as scientists and citizens, but our duty to all that is valuable on this precious planet. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I know a great many of you, but there are several whom I do not know, and I think it's entirely reasonable for those people to wonder how I find my way to this podium and to this award. And in response to that question, I will refer to you to Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 11. The race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, neither yet bread to wise, nor yet riches to men of understanding. But time and chance happeneth to them all. And so what I'm saying is I'm here out of sheer luck. And I'm usually astonished by how reluctant people are to acknowledge that much of what they accomplish is sheer luck. In my case, I started being lucky at an early age. I distinctly remember graduating from high school. I was 16, 17 years old, and thinking that my future did not look very promising. It was a very dark time in the apartheid era in South Africa. If at that time, on that day, somebody had told me what was going to happen to me during the course of the next 10 years, I would have dismissed it as fantasy, as completely unlikely to be realized. Nonetheless, 10 years later, I had a degree from a prestigious American university. I had a job at a prestigious American university, a different one. I had acquired a host of kind, generous friends and colleagues, Americans. And above all, I had married a gorgeous young woman from, of all places, Buenos Aires. I should digress for a minute and point out that when we first met, she understood not a word I said. A few months later, she did get the hang of a non-Californian accent, and I asked her to marry me. And it's this year we celebrate our 50th wedding anniversary. I'm happy to say that our son is here to participate in the celebrations. He brought along 2 brothers, cousins, and Sean constantly asks me, how many relatives do you have? My wife is a single child, and Argentinians are very small families, and she's quite envious. I discover relatives I don't know about. At any rate, the logical question to ask, so what have I learned from 50 years of marriage? And my response is that having a partner is much, much better than going it alone. And I would argue the same is true in scientific research. And having a partner is essential. Marc and I received this award on behalf of numerous people. We would certainly be only representatives of a very large group of people. And it's basically research is like entering an orchard. And you're trying to search for choice fruit. And in doing so, it's best to have people who are taller than you are, who see better than you do. So you should surround yourself with very capable people. Neither Marc and I, we both call ourselves oceanographers. We don't have much taste for going out to sea. When we started in this business, there was no GPS. You needed a star and a tall ship to steer her by, or a tall ship and a star to steer her by. We knew not a thing about sextants or stars. We couldn't find our way around anything. And we relied, and tried large numbers of people, but I'll only single out the ones who happened to be in the room. David Halpin, Bob Weisberg, Antha Lietma, they're all here. Those are the ones who went out to sea, got us the measurements we needed. We knew very little about the atmosphere. We would turn to Ines Fung, she's here, Ed Saracek is here. Then we succeeded in persuading some brilliant students to follow in our steps. And again, I'll only mention a few, but Lisa Goddard, Jim Carton, Bing Chang, whose daughter is here, Alexei Fedorov, Shangping Xie, they're all here this evening. There are many more. We're greatly indebted to all those people. We went further and we formed an international community with members from many, many countries. We flourished from their participation, but at the moment we are encountering problems. We need to be more inclusive rather than exclusive. And there's another group not been mentioned, but scientists, we urgently need laymen to take an interest in science. There's a dangerous lack of interest in science on the part of laymen. And if I had to paraphrase somebody, I think it was a 19th century German statesman who said that war is too important to be left to generals. And I will argue that the future of planet Earth is too important to be left to scientists. That the reason should be fairly obvious. Science has very severe limitations. It is mute on ethical issues. And Galileo explained to the Pope that science tells us how the heavens go. It does not tell us how to go to heaven. And it does not tell us how we should be living our lives. And global warming, it can be referred to as the tragedy of the commons, is a problem that's beyond the scope of science because it involves both science and ethical issues. And to that end, it's incumbent on everyone, laymen too, to be aware of why our planet is special, why should we take the trouble not to harm it, to help it flourish. The science has no answer to questions such as the following. What is the appropriate balance between our responsibilities to future generations and our obligations to those living in abject poverty? And so I'll make a statement, may make some of you feel uncomfortable, but in much of the world, certainly in Africa, global warming is not a high priority. Basically, poverty is the big poverty. Alleviation of poverty is the highest priority. The key to alleviation of poverty is education. And I would submit that the best vehicle for education is earth science, that it concerns phenomena we see. The science is usually taught as something very abstract, not really related to phenomena you can directly experience. And that obviously, the earth science can solve that problem quite easily. I therefore would like to see everybody participate in issues such as global warming. And I would argue that the current polarization of discussions of global warming has little to do with science. It has to do with extremely difficult ethical issues. And the science is easy. Scientific answers are objective. They're independent of race, of religion, ethnicity. Scientific methods have no room for compromise, no room for compassion. It's entirely different from ethical questions. Ethical issues, you have to take into account people's beliefs, their religious upbringing, all sorts of issues that require compromise. So I have a project in mind, and I'll describe it briefly to you. I have no idea as to how to implement it. So if anybody has an idea, I would appreciate comments. I can give you an email. But the project is to, I feel there's too much gloom and doom about global warming at the moment. And I said, you cannot tell the poor that the future will be worse. We're really obliged to give them hope. And so what I learned in South Africa is if you tell them that they're living on a marvelous planet, the environment there is most astonishing, that they should take pride in it, that they should take care of that, not out of fear of what may or may not happen, but because they love this planet. You cannot love that which you do not know, and so everybody should know, try to learn the essence of Earth science, why this is a habitable planet. Every time astronomers discover a new planet, I feel this one becomes more unusual. This is the only planet in the entire universe that we know to be habitable. It's a really complicated planet. We can learn the rudiments of it. The human body is very complicated, but we cope remarkably well with it by doing very simple things. Washing your hands, hygiene, diet, exercise. We all know those. If you turn it to the planet, people have not the foggiest idea how the planet works. So I propose that 2019 we declare it a year to celebrate planet Earth. 2019 will be the 50th anniversary of the first picture of planet Earth from the moon. So when you get home this evening, type into Google Earthrise, and you'll get the image of that picture. It's a breathtaking picture. It's our planet seen from the moon. It looks very vulnerable. It's out in space. All it gets is sunlight. How on earth does it manage to maintain conditions that favor us so well? So I propose that in 2019, for 1 year, we study the seasons. It's a huge climate signal. Right now, if you step outside, a miracle is occurring. Trees that had been dead for several months are coming to life. In due course, there will be summer, and then be a new cycle. If we could get everybody to get involved in explaining bottom up, I've gone way over my time, but I'll just briefly mention I'm involved with a group of school children in Long Island, and the teachers wanted to know how could they get the students interested in science. And if you ask people why the seasons occur, most will say the Earth is closer to the sun in summer than winter. Rather than dismiss that as a stupid answer, what the scientists will do is test it. So I put the students in contact with a group of students in Cape Town. And first of all, the Earth is close to the sun in summer. When is that the case? Ancient astronomers could tell us that. It's 3rd of January. So if you call Cape Town, you'll discover that January is a hot summer month when it doesn't rain. So the answer is actually right for half the planet. I can suggest other ways to use your cell phone where you can quickly discover that the Earth's axis must be tilted. But we can have a bottom-up movement in science education that will get people far more interested than listening to some gray-haired professor provide an answer. Science is not a list of facts. It's an activity that enriches your life. And so it was my biggest regret since Marc and I started. We children of Sputnik, and we found support for the two main goals of science. The one is practical benefits, and the other one is science out of curiosity. You want to know why the sky is blue. And it's most rewarding, and its science flourishes best when those two are in balance. Today, 30, 40 years later, there's been an enormous shift. Everybody wants to know, what have you done for me lately? There's very little encouragement to encourage curiosity. So I propose that we encourage curiosity starting 2019, continue it for a year to cover the whole seasonal cycle into 2020. We have an important election coming up that could be part of our project. If you have any ideas as to how to actually implement such a project, please let me know. Thank you.
It's now my pleasure to close this ceremony here in the heart of Columbia University, the iconic rotunda of Low Library. Please join me one last time in recognizing and congratulating the 2017 Vetlesen Prize laureates Marc, Kane, and George Philander. Please also join me now in acknowledging and thanking the Vetlesen Foundation trustees who have joined us tonight, Ambrose Monell, Maurizio Morello, and Gary and Faye Beecham. Thank you. Today, the importance of observing changes to our planet and developing models to help us understand and forecast those changes has never been clearer. Indeed, among the greatest challenges of our time is achieving an understanding of the complexities of the Earth system and applying that knowledge to devise approaches to sustainable economic and social development and to ensuring the well-being of future generations. Tonight's prize winners have shown us how such understanding proceeds from observations to powerful theory. My colleagues at Lamont apply this approach every day with every other aspect of the Earth system, and I am confident that as our knowledge grows, we will learn how to sustain human society in thoughtful balance with the resources and the forces of our planet. But gaining new knowledge and applying that knowledge to help humanity address global challenges requires resources. This fact has been understood for years by the Vetlesen Foundation and a few other similarly visionary philanthropic leaders. We will need more examples of such leadership in the very near future. if we are to meet the most critical of Earth's challenges. Tonight, we have been shown the way. This evening, we recognized outstanding achievement in science that is of critical importance to a better understanding of our planet. Please join me in thanking the Vetlesen Foundation for its support, Professors Kane and Philander for their profound research, and all of you for participating in a celebration of these remarkable scientific achievements. Thank you, and good evening.